back on the Young Turks. I love when I do that on a Monday. Well, we are back from the holidays, and happy holidays to you guys. Dare I say Merry Christmas. Well, that's gonna be our first topic in a little bit. We do have the usual madness from Donald Trump. We're gonna get into that in a little bit. And then the Democrats consider impeachment, but so far have decided against it. There could be good reasons for that. They have a particularly bad reason, which I'll share with you a little bit later in the program. And then, unfortunately, a 6-year-old gets shot by cops a couple of days before Christmas. So usual range of stories from happy to sad, of course. And then I want to show you a chart of income inequality in America that I think is incredibly telling. I don't want you to miss that. Because it gives you a sense of exactly how they redistributed income. And I got news for you. It wasn't trickling down to you, okay? But you got to see those charts to fully understand and hopefully share it with your friends too. All right, speaking of sharing with the friends, it's not over yet. So we still have the gift program, tyrtnetwork.com/gift. Gets you 3 months of membership for 25 bucks. All right, I got more on that later, but let's start the show. Okay. Well, Donald Trump is a megalomaniac and believes that he should get credit for things as trivial as the word fake. He literally said in an interview once that he invented the word fake. He said it might have been around before, but I'm the one who made it popular. Okay, now he's taking credit for Christmas. So he launched a number of tweets, all with big bold letters, including this one, saying, Merry Christmas. First of all, God bless, that's fantastic. Bless your heart. You do 17 of those. So far, so good, that's fine. You know that this is gonna turn into the war on Christmas spiel, right? That O'Reilly started, Fox News started, and of course Trump is jumping in on. That's why he's emphasizing this stuff, but that's all right. Let's go to the video of him talking around Christmas as well.
I just wanted to wish everybody a very, very Merry Christmas.
Very, very, Merry Christmas. Okay, we got it. How about one more?
We say Christmas again very proudly. Very, very Merry Christmas.
Very, very, very Merry Christmas to all of you as well. And we say it proudly, whereas before we hung our head in shame as we said Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. I don't remember that. No one remembers that in America, but he's not done yet. He goes on to say in a tweet, people are proud to be saying Merry Christmas again. I am proud to have led the charge against the assault of our cherished and beautiful phrase, Merry Christmas. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or so exclamation points. I don't have my glasses on. Okay, I think he makes a good point here, and I'm calling for the release of all the POWs from the war on Christmas. All the people who not only were imprisoned by Obama for saying Merry Christmas, but also those missing in action. Those who said Merry Holidays as a halfway point, or perhaps Happy Christmas. Where are they? Can we free them as well? Now, if you believe there was an actual war on Christmas, you verge on being a lunatic. People kept saying Merry Christmas throughout. No one made it illegal to say Merry Christmas. No one even thought it was a bad thing to say Merry Christmas. No progressive actually said that. Fox News made it up completely. Now, the conservative stance of forcing people to say Merry Christmas, first of all, doesn't seem very merry. That doesn't seem like it fits the holiday spirit. Second of all, if you are not Christian, and for example, if you're Jewish and they keep forcing you to say Merry Christmas, well, okay, then that could become problematic. I think a lot of people said it anyway because people aren't really that offended by it. But nonetheless, it takes on a different ring if all of a sudden you go from like, hey, it would be nice if you, people say Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas, we're all happy, no big deal, who cares, to wait a minute, you must say Merry Christmas. Well, that's bizarre, and it's also political correctness. In fact, it's political correctness 101. You are not allowed to say the things that you would normally say. You must say the things that are now politically correct, like Merry Christmas. Well, one thing we know though from Trump's campaign is that the last 8 years, Christmas has been banned. So it's kind of weird that the Obamas also put out this tweet, and it says, on behalf of the Obama family, Merry Christmas. Wait a minute, what is going on? Has he turned sides? Now he's saying Merry Christmas. He says, and we wish you joy and peace this holiday season. I wonder what he means by that. Okay. One thing that'll drive Trump crazy is Obama's tweet saying Merry Christmas got at least 7 times as much attention and likes, etc., as did Donald Trump's. So that'll get under his skin, and that's fun. If you're wondering if this is a new turn for Obama, oh my God, he's finally saying Merry Christmas because of Donald Trump. Well, one, if you think that, you haven't been paying any attention. 2, of course, it's not remotely true. I want to give credit here to Daniel Redman, who on Twitter put out a compilation video of previous things that President Obama said while he was in office. Let's listen.
Have a very Merry Christmas.
We want to say Merry Christmas to everybody.
A very, very Merry Christmas and a holiday filled with joy. I want to wish every American a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
So Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Apparently credit to MSNBC as well. That was awesome. So if you thought Obama didn't say Merry Christmas, you are not only wrong, but you've been duped as usual. There's never been a war on Christmas. It is completely invented, and anyone who says that is really kind of pathetic. Now there's one person who's also apparent, if it exists, is apparently also part of this war, and this one hits a little close to home. Oh my God, A2 Ivanka. That's right, December 11, 2017, and it says Happy Holidays. Oh, we knew Ivanka couldn't be trusted. Or perhaps it's because she converted to Judaism, and hence Happy Holidays makes sense. Is he gonna force his own daughter and his son-in-law and his grandkids, is he gonna come over and say Christmas, okay? I don't care what religion you're in. Insane. But there's one guy we know who's always been on the right side because he tells it like it is. It's Donald Trump. So let's go to a tweet from Donald Trump from 2010. Wishing everyone a very happy holiday season. Oh no, Donald, not you too. I'm glad to see that Donald Trump has also escaped from the war on Christmas. Apparently he was a hostage on the other side and is now on the right side of issues. Or perhaps this is all a load of horse crap and meant to divide us at a time where we're supposed to have holiday cheer and show kindness to one another. Okay, now let's go on to more Donald Trump news. This is a doozy. Okay. For a long time, Donald Trump promised that the tax cuts they were going to do was going to be for the middle class, not for the rich. No, of course not. In fact, he had told CBS News, the rich will not be gaining at all with this plan. We are looking for the middle class and we are looking for jobs. Jobs being the economy, okay? So now, he actually said that's someone else, CBS News is reporting it right now, but that was back in the fall, and that's a quote that a lot of people have shared, obviously, and he was bragging about, this is not for the rich. They will not be gaining at all. You just saw it in the quote. Okay, so CBS News now with a new report saying President Trump kicked off his holiday weekend at Mar-a-Lago Friday night at a dinner where he told friends, quote, you all just got a lot richer, referencing the sweeping tax overhaul he signed into law hours earlier. What happened? I thought the rich weren't going to be gaining at all. That, by the way, that is reported by people who were attending that dinner at Mar-a-Lago. So, no, Donald Trump's a liar and the tax cuts were always for the rich? Color me surprised. Yes, in fact, behind closed doors, as soon as he gets to his private properties that cost a tremendous amount of money to be a member of, he tells his rich friends, don't worry, I delivered for you. In fact, to give more context on that, CBS News said the president has spent many weekends of his presidency so far at the quote unquote winter White House, as he calls it, where initiation fees cost $200,000, annual dues cost $14,000, and some of the most affluent members of society have the opportunity to interact with the president in a setting while many Americans cannot. So there's no excuse that, well, I went to Mar-a-Lago and talked to the middle class. Do a lot of people in the middle class have $200,000 to throw away so they could have fancy dinners with their other rich friends, let alone the $14,000 a year on top of that, let alone all the things that cost money inside that club, which I'm sure is outrageously expensive? No, his real friends are the rich, and he just delivered for them, and he couldn't help himself because he's Donald Trump. So he bragged to them, hey guys, how did I do? I got you all the money. I took it from the middle class and I gave it to you. Did I do a good job? And remember when I lied to them and I said I'd be doing it for them? Wasn't that funny? By the year 2027, according to this law, 53% of Americans will be paying more in taxes, not less. Let alone the damage to the economy, let alone the redistribution of wealth overall, let alone the cuts that'll have to come against Social Security and Medicare, which now the Republicans and Paul Ryan are bragging about. Cuts are coming next. Put all that aside, you're going to be paying higher taxes by 2027. Why? Because the rich needed more taxes on top. By the way, that 53% is not the rich. It's coming from the poor and the middle class. Your taxes are going to get raised. Where is the money going? Well, let's take a look. According to Tax Policy Center, which is nonpartisan, 82.8% of the bill's benefit would go to the top 1%. So when he goes to Mar-a-Lago and shouts from the rooftops that his rich friends can celebrate Christmas because he just got them a huge tax cut, he's right. 83% of the money from that tax cut is going to go to the top 1% who doesn't need it at all. And it's also going to go to corporations, which is going to funnel it to their executives, who are almost all also in the top 1%. And they pretended that it was for you. What a sad, sad joke. It's the greatest robbery in American history. And Trump is almost literally laughing all the way to the bank, at least laughing all the way to Mar-a-Lago. Okay, that's the state of affairs in America today. Okay, so that's the tax bill. I've got more time, so let me keep going. I'll go on the impeachment for you guys. I got the story here. Aha, here we go. So now let's switch to the Democrats. Okay. Now, there is a wide range of opinions on whether Democrats should pursue impeachment against Donald Trump. And I think it is an interesting question. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion, even at this late date. There are 58 Democrats who have signed on for impeachment. There are other Democrats who think 25th Amendment's the right way to go. Leadership right now doesn't believe that any of those paths should be pursued. Now, I think that there are legitimate reasons to think that, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But as I read an article in Politico talking about why the Democrats are doing this, or in this case, not doing this, well, there was something in there that was the usual Democratic stuff that drives me crazy. So Jerry Nadler is very important to the Democrats in this regard because he's a top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee. If the Democrats were to retake the House, which now actually looks pretty much likely, even Chris Wallace on Fox News talking about how 40 seats are likely to swing in favor of the Democrats. Well, then Jerry Nadler would be the head of the committee that would pursue impeachment if they were to go in that direction. So let's look at his quotes and let's begin to analyze this. He said, impeachment, it's not something you ought to welcome. It's not something you ought to be ready to. It's not something you want. Okay, now look, that's a fair starting point. It's totally fine. You shouldn't look forward to impeachment with glee. I mean, it depends on the facts, it depends on the situation. And you can't impeach someone because of horrible policies. I think Trump has horrible policies, but sad day for us, he won the election. That's how elections go, so go out and vote. I think he's unstable. That could be a 25th Amendment issue. But in order to do impeachment, you have to actually have something that he's done against the law. There's an argument to be made that you could do impeachment for other reasons, but it's not an argument that's likely to win. So, Robert Mueller certainly might find something on him, and I think he will. That's my personal opinion, and I think that at that point, impeachment certainly will be worth pursuing, if that's the case. Some people make an argument about conflicts of interest and the emoluments clause, and I think those are interesting arguments. But now let's go into why the Democrats have decided not to pursue this. Politico explains that in fact, Nadler's expertise in constitutional law, as well as his outsized voice opposing the Clinton impeachment in 1998, was a factor in his selection to lead committee Democrats. Now, if they put a guy who was that gung-ho against impeachment of Clinton, that is a signal that they are saying, no, we are not going to go towards impeachment. If they thought at a later date that they might go in that direction, they would have put somebody in there that does not have as rich a record against impeachment as Nadler does. Warning sign number one. Okay, Nadler continues and says, if we were in the majority and if we decide that the evidence isn't there for impeachment, or if the evidence is there, we decide it would tear the country apart too much, there's no buy-in, there's no bipartisanship, and we shouldn't do it for whatever reason. If we decide that, then it's our duty to educate the country why we decided it. Oh boy. If he left it at the first half of the sentence and said, hey, if there isn't the evidence there, well then we can't do it. It's a perfectly fair sentence to say. And a lot of Democrats might disagree. 3/4 of Democratic voters now want impeachment. But it's one thing to want impeachment, it's another thing to be able to prove it, execute it, et cetera, and to actually get him out of office. But the second half of the sentence where it says, even if there is evidence, we shouldn't do it because it might quote unquote tear the country apart. Oh God, these Democrats, So the guy who could lead impeachment, if there is evidence to suggest that he should be impeached, is as usual doing a preemptive surrender on the issue, saying even if there is evidence that he will not pursue it because the Republicans would object. Yes, some of the deplorables that support Donald Trump and the alt-right, I'm sure, and Roger Stone and all those monsters would go, oh my God, you can't do this. So you're going to get bullied by them and you're going to preemptively say that you won't do it? Even if there is evidence. Oh, God damn. Okay, now that you go to Jared Huffman, now he supports impeachment, but even he says, this is a congressman from California, he says, as someone who favors impeachment, I feel strongly it needs to be bipartisan. I think that's one of the things Republicans got wrong in '98, that the bipartisan piece of it is assurance to the public that you're not just playing partisan games. We're a long way from Republicans joining us. Now, mixed bag there. So if you want to get him out of office completely, you need 2/3 of the Senate. So by definition, it has to be bipartisan. If you leave it at that, nothing wrong with that quote. But number one, he's going back to '98 because this is the hack stuff that a lot of Democrats and a lot of people, unfortunately, in the mainstream media believe. All politics is local. Who said that? Tip O'Neill, I know that. That's why I seem like a sage political pundit. Yeah, that Tip O'Neill said that back when there was no internet. All politics is not local anymore. All the local newspapers have been wiped out. All politics is on the internet now. So, and to some degree for old people on TV. So that's just not true. So, oh yeah, back in 98 might as well have been 1898 or 1798. So trying to learn lessons that are so outdated is not particularly clever. They always think like, oh, did you know that in '98 the Republicans became unpopular when they tried an impeachment based on ridiculous grounds? Yeah, of course we all know that. But it was on ridiculous grounds. And in fact, back then I was a Republican and I thought that what Bill Clinton had done was wrong. But when they pursued impeachment, that was one of the first times that I was like, whoa, that's weird. That seems like a bridge too far. And they swung a lot of people to the other side. But that is not this situation. They're not analogous, they're from a long time ago. And it tells the other side, by the way, we think our case might be as ridiculous as your case was. No, if Mueller's got them and they have the evidence, there's a perfectly sound case to pursue. But don't surrender ahead of time, okay? But we need the Republicans to join us. If you're gonna premise your entire strategy on Republicans agreeing to do the right thing, just clean up and go home already. Unless they're on the very precipice of losing their own seat, the Republicans will, of their own accord, almost never do the right thing. Like, what are you looking for, moral fiber? You've come to the wrong place. So here's more from Politico. The debate is roiling House Democrats, with progressives forcing a debate over the issue even as vulnerable incumbents, particularly members in districts that favor Trump, worry it could jeopardize their future in Congress. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's the answer right there. And this is what Democratic leadership does all the time. So it is not all Democrats. 58 Democrats have already signed on for the impeachment issues. Jamie Raskin doing a wonderful job with the 25th Amendment issue. I think that's actually more fruitful, okay? But when it comes to leadership, oh no, we have to protect the most conservative Democrats. So we will not fight forward. We will not support progressives. Instead, what we will do is try to make sure that the people in the most purple districts are the ones that rule our entire strategy. Now look, we know politics. I don't want to lose those purple seats. Nobody wants to lose those purple seats. But right now, Donald Trump is polling at 32%. That's not in jeopardy. So when you pretend that it's in as much jeopardy as it has ever been, you're doing that to excuse inaction. And second of all, when you consistently program your entire party around the most conservative Democrats, you get to another bigger problem, which you never acknowledge, which is that you don't make the progressive case and you don't fight for the progressive case. Why? Oh, no, I don't want to endanger the blue dog Democrats. Oh, the centrist corporatist Democrats, I don't want to endanger them. Let's make sure that leadership sides with them. That is a terrible idea. That is what has led to surrender after surrender and why Republicans win elections even though Democrats have all of the demographics and all of the policy issues on their side. Okay, finally, one more piece here. For Democrats reluctant to even broach the topic, that may mean explicit evidence linking Trump to Russian collusion or obstruction of justice in Mueller's report. Anything less, Bustos and other moderate lawmakers argue, and Democrats risk imperiling their House majority almost as soon as they take control. Do you understand that? So first excuse was, well, we might lose in some of those toss-up states and toss-up districts. Now, it's that poor excuse because as I just told you, the polling indicates they're gonna win big. So they're like, oh yeah, that's true. But once we have the majority, we should make sure that we do nothing with it because it would imperil our next election. There's never enough excuses for the Democrats for inaction. They'll find another one and another one and another one. They keep talking about how they want to keep their powder dry. That is the driest powder in the history of politics. And then they wonder why we get the sense that they might not fight for us. It is their intention, even if they win, to wait for Republican approval before they go forward on progressive priorities. Wow, I'm so motivated. This is what a losing strategy looks like. Young Turks.
Find ourselves in. We need media we can trust now more than ever. And the problem with those big corporate media outlets is that they take money from big corporations. And so who do you think they're actually reporting for at the end of the day? See, TYT is different. We can be your Rudolph and lead you through a complicated world like he did. We're funded by people like you, and we want to stay independent. One way you can help us do that is by giving the gift of TYT membership this holiday season. After a year of metaphorical lumps of coal in their stocking, they'll appreciate the change. Visit tytnetwork.com/gift today.
I have decided that I'm going to get ripped. Okay.
What?
Okay.
Like physically?
Yeah. Okay. What, you don't believe me?
I 100% don't believe you.
I will get so ripped, here's my prediction, that someone at TYT will say, Cenk, you've got to stop working out.
We're tired of you winning.
So you don't believe me?
Cenk, you don't have time to do your daily duties for the main show.
Duties. I don't even have time for your daily duties. Because what you guys don't know is how great my muscles already are.
It's absolutely possible, but you can't have Leah run to the food truck to get you 2 different types of grilled cheeses with tater tots for lunch. You can't have that anymore.
Let's see what happens.
You also have to go to the gym regularly.
Let's see what happens. All I'm saying is, let's see what happens. Have I ever been wrong about a prediction? Almost never.
I just shot a clip. It's time sensitive and it needs to be edited right now.
Did anybody call for an editor?
Need this in an hour.
But you're an editor too.
Fuck you.
Back on the Young Turks. A couple tweets for you guys. Hashtag TYT Live. Talk to us during the show. Joseph S. says, I'm okay with the Dems not trying to impeach Trump quite yet. I'm probably in your camp, but here's the camp I'm definitely in. As soon as there's enough evidence, we should not hold back because the Republicans don't agree, or it would quote unquote tear the country apart because the other side promises to be violent. By the Lake 23 writes in, an impeachable offense is anything Congress deems it is. I hear you on that, but we should be on solid footing, and I don't want to set a wrong precedent and then have impeachment every time a president comes into office and the other side disagrees vehemently. It has to, in my opinion, be for significant law breaking. Lucky for us, Trump seems to have done that, but we'll see. I'll reserve judgment until all the evidence is in, okay? I am Sock asks, so who won the war on Christmas? Fox News seems to be losing it every year. Sad. Well, that's why Trump tweeted what he did. He's declaring victory. I don't know how he got the victory. I don't know if he killed everybody on the Happy Holidays side or imprisoned them. I don't know what he did to them, but he has. He's apparently winning the war on Christmas. He's winning it so much he's starting to get tired of winning. Unregistered Chicano says, no matter how impossible it is to fuck up the 2018 elections, corporate Democrats will find a way. Don't count them out. All right, now let's go to a Republican. Okay. So Jeff Flake is a right-winger through and through, and he's also spoken out against Donald Trump. He's the retiring Republican senator from Arizona. And he said some pretty harsh things about Trump, which Trump has amply earned. But he still voted for the tax cuts. He still votes with Trump on an overwhelming majority of the time. So he's not your friend. But he did have some straight talk, if you will. Makes sense coming out of Arizona, I suppose. They asked him if the Republicans continue in Trump and Bannon's direction, could they lose the Senate? He said, most definitely. You look at the audience, audiences cheering for Republicans sometimes. You look out there and say, those are the spasms of a dying party. Interesting. I'm going to let him continue here and then I'll fill in what he might mean by that. He says, when you look at the lack of diversity sometimes, and it depends on where you are obviously, but by and large we're appealing to older white men and there are just a limited number of them, and anger and resentment are not a governing philosophy. So he's literally right about that. When you look at the demographic information, it is not a pretty picture for the Republicans. Only the corporate Democrats could find a way to lose to Republicans in elections that appear to be not losable when you look at the demographics and the policy issues. More important than that, Americans agree with progressives on almost every issue by wide margins. You'd be hard pressed to find an issue that Americans don't agree with progressives on. Like, oh yeah, immigration, what about immigration? Build a wall. No, did you know that 93% of Americans believe in a pathway to citizenship? So overwhelming numbers. They want some sort of immigration reform, and pathway to citizenship is overwhelmingly popular. So even in Alabama, in that Doug Jones-Roy Moore race, people under the age of 45 in one of the reddest states in the country, over 60% of them voted for the Democrat if they were under the age of 45. Tick-tock, tick-tock. So, and Flake, to his credit, also had earlier said that servility to Trump is, quote, morally treasonable. Apparently servility to Trump in voting for tax cuts for the rich, perfectly fine, but otherwise is morally treasonable. Well, all that is my agreements and disagreements with Jeff Flake and fairly normal stuff. The most important thing is, what will a guy like Flake do if Mueller finds information about Trump? What will the rest of the Republicans do? Because that will be the decision point for what is going to happen in this country. Either we're going to have tremendous turmoil and rip this country apart in terms of the Republicans saying, we're going to allow law breaking and we're going to let the president be above the law. And that would be terrifying. And we could literally lose our form of government. It's not an exaggeration. If the Republicans say, no, politically, we're just going to let the president break the law. That would be unprecedented and horrifying. So those Republicans do have an important decision to make at one point. And now Donald Trump is talking about firing Mueller before we get there because he knows he's guilty. So Flake had a response to that. He said, I don't think that would go over well at all here in the Senate. I don't think he'll go there. He shouldn't go there. Well, I'm not as confident as Senator Flake on how the Republicans will react if Trump obstructs justice further by firing Mueller, or the people who, or firing Rod Rosenstein so that he'll get a new Deputy Attorney General who'll fire Robert Mueller. I hope that Flake is right on this instance and that the Republicans in the Senate will stand up to Donald Trump and say, if you do that, we are going to impeach you. You sure they're going to go that way? I don't think anybody's sure that they're going to go that way. There's a good sign, at least there's one guy saying it's unacceptable for now, but if we're relying on the moral fiber of the Republican Party, God help us all, but that might be the situation we're in soon. Okay. Now, let's go to the next story, because while Flake is saying positive things, others are not in this regard. Okay. So there are some Republicans that are standing up to Donald Trump in small ways. They vote with him on policy issues almost all the time anyway. But guys like Jeff Flake and John Cornyn, a very important Republican in the Senate, warning not to fire Mueller, that it will be a very bad idea for Donald Trump. Meanwhile, there are others who are going in the opposite direction. So there's Representative Francis Rooney, Republican of Florida. He was recently on television, and he was talking about the FBI and the special counsel and the people investigating Donald Trump. should they just be allowed to do their job and find out if there's evidence or not? Well, he's not in favor of that. In fact, he says, I don't want to discredit them. I would like to see the directors of those agencies purge it and say, quote, look, we've got a lot of great agents and a lot of great lawyers here. Those are the people that I want the American people to see and know the good work's being done, not these people who are kind of the deep state. So they're now just flat out saying it. So if anyone's investigating the president, they should be purged. Why? They say, oh, well, I mean, it's the deep state and, it's the government, trying to obstruct the president. No. Do we have a country of laws or don't we? If we do, no one is above the law. Now, if they do an investigation and they come up with weak sauce evidence, as much as it pains me, I'll say that is not enough. And we'll see what they have. But for these guys to say, no, you should not investigate the president, and if you are, you should be purged. Well, that's not a democracy. And guys like Francis Rooney are authoritarian by nature, and given the opportunity, they will put that brown shirt on and begin to purge all their opponents. First, the people investigating the president, so he goes scot-free, and so we don't have rule of law anymore. We just have rule by strongman. And then, once you've started the arrests, political opponents are easy. In fact, they're talking on Fox News about the purge, including Hillary Clinton and other people they have decided are political opponents. So when they come for the FBI, we should all stand strong that we believe in the rule of law, we believe in our democracy. It's not to say that the FBI does everything right or our intelligence agencies do. I do not believe that at all. But for them to try to shut down the legitimate investigation for their political purposes and start talking about firing people, or on Fox News, they're talking about imprisoning FBI agents. That's what dictators do. No, hell no, should lead to immediate impeachment. But here they are out in the open. First started on Fox News, then Rooney was on MSNBC talking about that. Now they're all over cable making a purge normal. It's not normal, it's anti-democratic, and it should be fought tooth and nail. Okay, now those are serious stuff. Now here comes Ass Kisser that's on a lighter note. Let's go to Huckabee, okay. Mike Huckabee ran against Donald Trump, got humiliated by him, but now, of course, being the sycophant that he is, he's all over Donald Trump kissing his ass. Now, mind you, his daughter, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, is the basically the press secretary for the president, so okay, he's got that interest in there as well, and he is deeply authoritarian right-winger, just like Donald Trump, and would probably doesn't really care for our system of government, just like Donald Trump. And I don't know to what degree he would be corrupt, just like Donald Trump, but he wants to excuse all of that. But he's gonna go over the top here a little bit in praising Trump. He says he just saw The Darkest Hour. So here, I'll give you his exact tweet. He said, Ducks took today off, but if you can get to a theater, go see The Darkest Hour about Churchill. Reminds us to what real leadership looks like. Now, that by itself is the most innocuous tweet you've ever seen in your life. Nothing wrong with that, praising Churchill, okay. But of course, he can't help himself, he goes to the next tweet. He says, Churchill was hated by his own party, opposition party, and press, feared by King as reckless and despised for his bluntness, but unlike Neville Chamberlain, he didn't retreat. He had a Chamberlain for 8 years. No, we had a Chamberlain for 8 years, and in Trump, we have a Churchill. It's just embarrassing. Really, Donald Trump is Winston Churchill. Well, to be fair, Churchill helped to defeat the Nazis, and Trump just declared victory on the war on Christmas. You say tomato, I say tomato. I see where you're coming from, Mike. And Obama was Neville Chamberlain to who? Who did he surrender to? In fact, Trump came into office and said, he's not going to reveal his secret ISIS strategy, for example, because in reality, according to the leaks from inside the White House, it was the same as Obama's strategy. And I do remember that famous speech that Trump gave, We shall fight for the rich in the streets. We shall fight for them in Congress. We shall fight for them at Mar-a-Lago. But we shall never surrender in fighting for the rich to make sure they get their tax cuts. Yes. Profile and courage, Donald Trump is. I don't have to add anything. Huckabee does plenty well enough embarrassing himself. Okay. Let me take a quick break here. When we come back, I got two more stories for you. One is the charts and the numbers behind how powerful people in this country redistributed the wealth to the top. When you see the numbers from 1980 to today, you'll see how stark it is, where the money moved and why it moved. And then the Saudis decided to kidnap a foreign prime minister. Now he's been released now, but what an unbelievably crazy, unbalanced move. So, and wait till you see how they're planning to destabilize the rest of the Middle East. So that when we return. I have decided that I'm going to get ripped. Okay.
What?
Okay.
Like physically?
Yeah. Okay. What, you don't believe me?
I 100% don't believe you.
I will get so ripped, here's my prediction, that someone at TYT will say, Cenk, you've got to stop working out.
We're tired of you winning.
So you don't believe me?
Cenk, you don't have time to like do your daily duties for the main show.
Duties. You don't even have time for your daily duties. Because what you guys don't know is how great my muscles already are.
It's absolutely possible, but you can't have Leah run to the food truck to get you like 2 different types of grilled cheeses with like tater tots for lunch. Like you can't have that anymore.
Let's see what happens.
You also have to go to the gym regularly.
Let's see what happens. All I'm saying is, let's see what happens. Have I ever been wrong about a prediction? Almost never.
Hey Dave, as you can probably see, Skype froze.
Yes.
Froze and crashed.
You know, I'm watching that documentary on the Vietnam War, and there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts, and it didn't crash. And that was 1965, and he was in Vietnam.
They'd rather lose to Republicans than have a progressive win with them. That's how dumb the corporate Democrats are.
It's the Democrats who lull you to sleep, and at the end of the day, they're the ones who push the right-wing agenda.
This is why you lost to Trump, you fucking moron. What the fuck is wrong with you? Whoever wrote that, I'm sure they were typing with one hand and going like this with you. The Democrats are dead. The way you feel right now, that's how a chump feels. Do not freak out.
All right, back on the Young Turks. The liberal mom writes in, these establishment Democrats are desperate for a strong man to lead them or one to hide behind when they are cowering. Go home, Blue Dogs. It's time to let the progressive wing take over. Rita Ann writes in, a family member told me that since the Republicans got their tax cut, now they can impeach. My response was they aren't done screwing us over yet. Entirely possible. Wordburn Steinem writes in, you know you're in trouble when you have to rely on Republicans' moral character or the Democrats' ability to fight. Trying to work on that. Okay, so by the way, all the discounts at Shop TYT will not relent. We've got another one for you guys. We did the big holiday percent off for all the Shop TYT, but now we're going collection by collection. So the Resist collection, there's a big discount, 25% off. So you got to use a promo code though. So when you go to shoptyt.com, put the promo code, I didn't make this up, treat yourself for the Resist collection, okay? The promo code is treat yourself. You get 25% off. Okay, let's go over here, talk about redistribution. Republicans just passed a massive tax cut for the rich. 83% of the gains will go to the top 1%. Well, this is not new to American politics. Ronald Reagan did a giant tax cut for the rich. George W. Bush did a giant tax cut for the rich. And they have been whittling down taxes for the rich and redistributing the money from the middle class and the poor up to the top. Now, people sometimes say that. Well, in this case, we have the numbers to back it up. So let me lead you through a new report that came out. It is a 2018 World Inequality Report. They explain here at the Washington Post that back in 1980, the bottom 50% of wage earners in the United States earned about 21% of all income in the country, nearly twice as much as the share of income, 11%, earned by the top 1% of Americans. Now, the bottom 50% getting only 21% of the income for the whole country, that's unfortunate, but we roughly understand why that's the case. Of course, the top income brackets are gonna get a larger percentage of the income, so there's no way that the bottom 50% could get 50% of the income. That's just not how the curve works. So we're perfectly cognizant of that. 21% is not a great number, but it is what it is in that case. And the top 1% guy used to get 11% of the income. So if trickle-down economics was correct, and after all those massive tax cuts for the rich, well, it would have trickled down on us, and by now, you would think, well, the bottom 50% probably have a higher percentage of the income because they told us that if you give tax cuts for the rich, it stimulates the economy and you get more jobs, and it's actually better for the poor and the middle class. Let's find out if that was the case. The bottom 50% now take in only 13% of that income pie, while the top 1% grab over 20% of the country's income. So the top 1% went from 11% of the income to 20% of the income. So their share nearly doubled, whereas the share of the bottom 50% plummeted. What happened? I thought it was supposed to help us. But instead of having 21% of the economic pie, right now, the bottom half of the country is down to just 13% of the economic proceeds. So they summarize by saying since 1980, in other words, the US economy has transferred 8 points of national income from the bottom 50% to the top 1%. So when Republicans warn you about wealth redistribution, I think they got it a little bit reverse. And what do Republicans always do? They do projection. Whatever they're thinking, they say out loud about the opponents. So in this case, they have been planning and have executed wealth redistribution. It's just the other way around. They took it from the bottom and they moved it to the top. Literally, literally. Okay, so let's take a look at the chart that shows you what happened in those years. So that's from 1980 to 2016. So the percentage of the economic gains in America that the bottom 50% have plummeted. The top 1% has skyrocketed. That right there is how they redistributed the wealth. Now that's a chart showing you. Now let's talk about why and how. It didn't happen on its own. Sometimes people will say things like, well, there's nothing you can do about that. That's how economies work. That's not true. I'm going to show you how Europe looks in a second. No, it was a set of laws that were in place meant to redistribute the money. So Washington Post writer Christopher Ingram explains, over the same time, the tax code became more generous to the wealthiest Americans. The top marginal income tax rate fell from 70% in 1980 to 39.6% in 2017. Taxes on capital gains fell by more than half from the mid-1970s to the mid-2000s, and the estate tax has fallen as well. So this is all before Trump's giant tax cuts for the rich. So, because we already had giant tax cuts, as he explains, through Reagan and Bush and others. So, given all of that, yeah, they took the money, and instead of having the rich pay their fair share, they say you don't have to pay as much. And by the way, some of the taxes they increased were things like the payroll tax. Well, the payroll tax, the rich don't even pay. After a certain level of income, around $120,000, they stop paying the payroll tax. That is the most regressive tax we have, the one that affects the middle class the most. That goes up, taxes for the rich goes down. So you don't have to wonder how all of this came about. Income inequality was a plan. It's not an accident, it's not normal, it's not natural. It's a plan that they executed to make sure that they moved the money to the top. And they laughed all the way as they talked about trickle-down economics. Well, let me show you another chart to see how well that trickle-down worked. So over that period of 1980 to 2014, so that's about 35 years, a giant period of time. If trickle-down economics had worked, the bottom 20% would have been in great shape. But over 35 years, their income only went up 4%. That is miserable. That's a flat line. You got nothing over 35 years. The next 30% barely rose at 26%. If that were to happen in a single year, for example, 26%, that would be a wonderful number. Over 35 years, that's a terrible number. And as you see, the closer you get to the top, the higher and higher it gets. Top 10%, their income went up 113% over that period of time. Top 1%, their income nearly doubled. And the top 0.01%, their income went up 423%. I can see where the money is. Look at the chart. Where's the money? Did it trickle down? No. Those are not money. That's not money they kept. That's increases in their income. Increases. They moved all the money to the top. It's not an accident. It's a plan. When people talk about how the system is rigged, how do they rig it? Well, they allowed private financing of elections, and the rich went and bought politicians. They gave them private checks, and then politicians, unsurprisingly, worked for them and turned around and gave them all of the benefits. They rewrote the tax code, they rewrote regulations, they rewrote everything to the benefit of the rich and corporations and at our expense. So finally, let me show you what Western Europe looks like. This is developed Western countries, very similar to ours. But they did not get captured. Their governments did not get captured by the rich because they don't have money in politics. They don't allow for private financing of elections because they're not stupid. They know that leads to your politicians working for private interests, not the public interest. So the bottom 50% has not plummeted. Their income has not plummeted, and it is above 20% of the overall income in those countries. And the top 1% has risen, but not by much. They are still at around 12 to 13% of the economic gains, which is where we were back in 1980 when they started rigging the system in favor of the rich and multinational corporations. And all this before the Trump tax cuts. Wait till you see what that chart looks like after the Trump tax cuts. So is there income inequality? Absolutely. It's provable. It's right there in the numbers. Is it something that naturally happens in every country? No, not remotely. Is our system rigged in favor of the rich and powerful? Absolutely. And this is how they rigged it. All right, now I got one more story for you guys in this hour. And it's a doozy. Okay. This is an insane story brought to you by the government of Saudi Arabia. So they have a lot of influence in different parts of the Middle East, including Lebanon. So they invited the Prime Minister of Lebanon, Saad Hariri, over to Saudi Arabia to talk to him because they were not happy because he leads a coalition government. Now he's Sunni, And the Saudis are Sunni. That's good. They should be on the same team. As you're going to see, historically, they have been on the same team in a lot of ways. But part of his coalition government, Hariri's coalition government, includes Shia and includes Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah is a strange character there because they are partly a rebel group outside of the state. They do terrorism from time to time, but they're also a political party that participates in the Lebanese government. So that's, for us here in the US, that's a little mind twisting. It's a little hard to understand, but that is the reality of Lebanon, and he can't run the government without them. They need some sort of coalition government, otherwise they're going to go to war. And it's not like Lebanon hasn't been ripped apart by civil war, it has. So it's a fragile piece that they're keeping. Well, the Saudis are apparently upset about that. So, because right now they're in the middle of fighting against Shia. So if you don't know, the two major Muslim factions are Sunni and Shia. Most of the Muslim world is Sunni, but Iran and some of their allies, including in Yemen, are Shia. And the Saudis right now are bombing the living hell out of Yemen. And the US, by selling them weapons, is helping them to do that. And gross human rights violations. Here in the US, we shouldn't have a dog in that fight. I've got issues with the Shia Muslims in Iran. I've got issues with the Sunni Muslims in Saudi Arabia. Not the actual human beings, but their governments and the actions that they're taking. But we have decided that Saudi Arabia has more oil. I mean, is a more important ally than Iran. And so we're backing them in the destruction of Yemen. And so since some of the allies of Iran are going against Saudi Arabia, they are livid and they pull in Hariri. But here's where this story gets crazy. He thinks that he's going to a normal diplomatic mission. He's the leader of one country. He's going to meet Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who's the leader of, he's not the leader yet of Saudi Arabia, but in effect he is, because he's imprisoning people and taking action, etc. He's the Crown Prince. And he thinks he's going to go camping in the desert with him. It turns out, no, they're going camping, but a different kind of camp. So when he goes at 8:30 in the morning to meet the Crown Prince, the New York Times picks up the story. They say he was stripped of his cell phones, separated from all but one of his usual cluster of bodyguards, and shoved and insulted by the Saudi security officers. Then came the ultimate indignity. He was handed a pre-written resignation speech and forced to read it on Saudi television. That's the prime minister of a different country. That's mental. They kidnapped the leader of a foreign country and made him read a statement on air. New York Times talked to a dozen diplomats, both in the West, in Lebanon, and in the area overall. So this is really well sourced. They explained this, it seemed, was the real reason he had been beckoned to the Saudi capital, Riyadh, a day earlier to resign under pressure and publicly blame Iran as if he were an employee and not a sovereign leader. Before going on TV, he was not even allowed to go to the house he owns there. He had to ask guards to bring him a suit. So clearly a prisoner at that point. So the prince intended to send a message, the Crown Prince, New York Times explains, for Saudi Arabia. It was time to stop Iran's Lebanese ally Hezbollah, the powerful Shiite organization that is Lebanon's most influential political actor, from growing still stronger. So why does Hariri have to listen to him? I mean, what are they going to just keep him in prison? What can they do to him if he's the leader of a different country? Well, let's look into that. Like his father Rafiq before him, Mr. Hariri owed his political career and considerable family fortune to the Saudi backing. But the Saudis grumbled that Mr. Hariri's government was giving too much sway to Hezbollah, which is both a political party and a militant group not answerable to the state. So he partly got there through the Saudis, so they're basically calling in their chips. So what else do they have on him? Saudi Arabia had many pressure points to use against Mr. Hariri. It could threaten to expel the 250,000 or so Lebanese workers in Saudi Arabia, damaging Lebanon's economy. I don't think that was it. But anyway, New York Times continues, and since Mr. Hariri is a dual Saudi citizen with extensive business dealings in a country where kickbacks are endemic, they could threaten him personally. An Arab diplomat said Mr. Hariri was threatened with corruption charges. So that is the excuse that the Crown Prince has used to imprison his political opponents in Saudi Arabia, including one of the richest men alive, Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, is in a basically in a prison in a fancy hotel in Saudi Arabia, along with a lot of other Saudi princes. This is a massive power play by the crown prince. So I guess he was threatening to imprison a prime minister of a different country because they think they're also untouchable. All right, we'll get into that in a second. Hours later, the Saudi authorities began their corruption roundups, detaining 2 of Mr. Hariri's former business partners, a reminder of his own vulnerability. In other words, if you don't play ball, we will literally imprison you just like we did with your business associates right there and make sure you don't get out. So did it work? Well, Mr. Hariri rescinded his resignation immediately after an international diplomatic scramble brought him safely home. And look, I get frustrated with us helping the Saudis destroy Yemen, helping them spread their fundamentalist Islam ideology throughout the world. I don't know why in the world we would help with that. That's also insane. In this case, US, French, and other diplomats, Western diplomats, did do a good job of putting pressure on the Saudis to let the prime minister go, and that worked. So now Mr. Hariri remains in office, the New York Times explains, with new popularity, and Hezbollah is stronger than before. Oops, hey, look at that, a dictator with a bad plan. Didn't see that coming. But it turns out that the plans of the Saudi government are worse than we even expected. So the New York Times continues to explain, as bizarre as the episode was, it was just one chapter in the story of Prince Mohammed, the ambitious young heir apparent determined to shake up the power structure, not just of his own country, but of the entire region. At home, he has jailed hundreds of fellow princes and businessmen in what he casts as an anti-corruption drive. Abroad, he has waged war in Yemen and confronted Qatar. So is it really an anti-corruption drive? You think the crown prince is not corrupt? You think the king is not corrupt? You think all those princes are not corrupt? The whole system is built on corruption. So at any point, anyone can do a power move by going, oh, I'll point out the other prince's corruptions. And he rounded them all up. This is a purge. Trump is good friends with the Saudis. I hope he's not learning these lessons, but we hear of purges here in the US, Republican congressmen now bragging about it all over TV that they're going to do likewise. Anyway, back to Saudi Arabia. With anxieties running high, Lebanese officials worked to head off what they had feared was a long-range plan by Saudi Arabia to destabilize Lebanon's volatile Palestinian refugee camps. Oh, great, because things aren't messed up enough in the Middle East. Our so-called allies, Saudi Arabia, are planning to destabilize Palestinian camps. Who do you think that's going to blow up on? It's going to blow up on Lebanon, it's going to blow up on the entire Middle East, it's going to blow up on us, but it's also going to blow up on Israel. You think it's a good idea to destabilize Palestinian refugee camps? Meanwhile, the Saudi prince, apparently undaunted by international concerns, summoned yet another leader, the Palestinian president Mahmoud Abbas, and issued instructions on Palestinian politics. Officials differ on what Mr. Abbas was told in Riyadh. Oh, great, so now he's telling the Palestinian leader what to do. The Saudi recommendations to Mr. Abbas could destabilize the fractious Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon, as senior Lebanese officials said. Separately, a Lebanese ally of the Saudis had urged jihadist factions in one Palestinian camp to form a, quote, Sunni resistance militia to counter Hezbollah, an idea so dangerous that the jihadists themselves refused, Lebanese and Palestinian officials and a Western diplomat said. That's a lot of sources. That story is incredibly likely to be true and accurate. So these lunatics went to a bunch of Sunni jihadists and said, hey, why don't you go start fighting the Shia jihadists? And that idea was so crazy that even the jihadists were like, boy, man, that's a really bad idea. Great, what wonderful allies we have in Saudi Arabia. And now the latest. Well, some parts of this plan have worked. Mr. Nasrallah, that's the leader of the Hezbollah in Lebanon, his speeches have omitted critiques of Prince Mohammed lately. And on Wednesday, he called for peace talks in Yemen, a major step. Well, look, I want peace in Yemen, so that's wonderful. But did it overall work? One of the things that they were enraged about in Saudi Arabia was a rocket had been fired towards Riyadh, their capital. Well, you're firing nonstop rockets into Yemen and pulverizing the country, but how dare dare you? We are above everything. We are the royalty of Saudi Arabia. So the main intent was, of course, to protect themselves and to purge out all their opponents. So did that work? Well, then again on Tuesday, Yemen's Houthis fired another missile at Riyadh. So no, it did not work. It didn't work in getting Hariri out of office. It didn't work in, thank God, destabilizing the Palestinian refugee camps. And it didn't work in stopping missiles into their own country. Well, what did the Crown Prince think? What did the king think when they went to war in Riyadh? They thought what all right-wingers across the world think. War will give us peace. Did it? Absolutely not. Now the kidnappings and the purges have begun. Has that given them peace? Absolutely not. War does not lead to peace. Peace leads to peace. I know that the right-wingers and unfortunately a lot of the press in the world find that to be a radical idea. It's not. It's a smart idea. It's a logical idea. We should maybe encourage our allies to go in that direction instead of these lunatic maneuvers where they try to destabilize the entirety of the Middle East. With allies like this, you don't need enemies. Young Turks. Young Turks, Cenk Uygur, Hannah Cranston, Ida Rodriguez. I feel like we should do a power battle drop, but it's a Tuesday. It's a Tuesday, so just regular.
It's a Tuesday after Christmas. I feel like it's a special day.
It's a special panel.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So great to have you guys here.
Thank you for having me.
Hopefully you guys had a good Christmas. Rock and roll. All right.
I had food poisoning. So it was a good Christmas because I did not gain weight on Christmas. I couldn't.
I like how you look on the upside of things.
Always.
Yeah. All right. Let me read a couple tweets here. Ryan C. Hardigan says, well, Churchill was also a horrible racist, so there's that. Because how could we have compared Trump to Churchill? And Sarah Elric saying, hi, Jake. I hope you had a really good Christmas. Keep up the excellent work. But thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it. And Anna Hernandez writes in, so Dems are overdramatic to compare Trump to a dictator, but the Republicans are spot on a comparison to Churchill. I think it's more than kissing ass. So, okay. God bless. All right. We have a lot of stories for you guys in the second hour. And as usual, unfortunately, some of them are tragic.
Yeah.
Okay.
First one particularly.
Yes.
All right. Cameron Prescott is a 6-year-old boy who was shot last week during a deputy shootout. Now, this is a picture here of Cameron, and he is most likely the youngest victim of a police shooting in 2017. Hopefully we can throw up the picture soon so that you can see it. But he's a very adorable 6-year-old boy who was tragically shot last week. Now, the shooting took place in Schertz, Texas. Now, the sheriff, Javier Salazar, said that a deputy was responding to a call about a stolen vehicle when he found the suspect, a woman named Amanda Jones, who was wanted on 2 felony warrants. He said the woman appeared to be armed and threatened to shoot the deputy before she fled. All right, so now hours later, she made her way back to a mobile home park. She forced her way into one of the homes. It was Cameron's home, and he was inside with his grandfather and a girl. Now, apparently during the time that she was in the mobile home, she threatened to steal their car. She threatened that she did have a gun before she actually faced the deputies. Now, she went out and she threatened to shoot them and appeared to be holding something resembling a handgun. That's when 4 deputies opened fire and killed her. And unfortunately, one of the deputies' bullets also struck Cameron, and the deputy actually administered first aid but was unable to save his life. Now, the 4 deputies who opened fire are actually placed on administrative leave for 5 days. And this is just a tragic and horrendous story that Cameron was caught up in this. Now, there has been no handgun that was found on site. There was a pipe that was found that resembled, I guess is what they're saying, resembled the handgun during the shooting. But nonetheless, this is just a horrendous tragedy.
One part of the story says, as of Friday, officials had not recovered a weapon. Right. I got news for you, they're not gonna recover one. Right. Believe me, they looked for one right away after they shot and killed not only her, but the kid. Trying to find that weapon would have been their #1 priority, so there was no weapon. So, look, the result of this is as horrific as it gets. What led up to it is not as horrific as some other stories we've seen, but that is as low a bar as you could possibly have. So then you got people being shot in the back, you got people crawling on their knees, being shot in hotel hallways, etc. In this case, she at least said she had a weapon a couple of times. Now, the first time she said she had a weapon, she didn't, and she never fired it. This time they never saw a weapon, she at least said it. But most importantly though, we used to have training in America where cops were really careful. Freeze, you're under arrest, put your hands up, etc. Right? And part of the reason some jurisdictions have stopped high-speed chases is because it endangers innocent civilians. Guess what also endangers innocent civilians? A shootout right in the middle of a residential area. Now, if you cared about the community more and you taught the police to care about the community more, they would take a little bit higher percentage chance to make sure that their bullets didn't go into other people's homes. If you teach them that their life is the most important thing there is and the community's life is a much lower priority, well, it might or might not be a gun, let's just do a hail of bullets and see what happens. Well, a hail of bullets in this case killed someone with no weapon and a 6-year-old boy. That's why we tell you, do police training where we prioritize the community. And by that, I mean all of our communities, as opposed to at all costs, just protect yourself.
So when you say all communities, that's what immediately goes through my head is that this happened at a trailer park, and that people who are of lower income, who live in lower income neighborhoods, are more subject to these types of tragedies. And I grew up in one of those neighborhoods, and I know that when the police comes through, you get flat, that's what they say, get on the floor until it passes because you can catch a bullet. But I do think that in this day, when all of the things that are happening and the police constantly stays under fire because of, we keep attacking, you know, the police, and I'm not talking about you, but I'm saying when it comes to a lot of the issues with race, but it's a systemic issue, right? And the police just happens to be, they happen to be the guys executing I get really pissed off. Okay, so the cops are doing their dirt, but because the system is in place, they continue to do their dirt, but the system is working against us. And these cops who don't make a lot of money, are not being properly trained, are going out into these neighborhoods that they don't feel comfortable in, and people die. So I am not anti-police, but I am pro-police. What's the word, Jank? I want the police to get better.
Accountability.
Well, yeah, accountability, and I think you make a really good point, right? No, I don't think, I mean, of course there are some people that are anti-police, but I don't think what we're saying here is anti-police, right? I think what we're saying here is that we want the police force to be better trained, and the police force should be on board with that as well. They shouldn't be put in a situation where 4 deputies are firing at one woman who doesn't even have a gun. You know what I mean? Of course there's gonna be a stray bullet that can cause damage. So that's one issue that I think that should have been addressed prior to this sort of tragedy. I think another issue is we need to start being able to recognize guns. You know what I mean? There's so many of these situations where police, you know, assume something is a gun and it's a cigarette pack or it's a hair comb or whatever it may be. This woman was holding a pipe, and I understand that safety comes first and sometimes you're not able to tell what it is, but if she's brandishing a pipe, you should be able to see that that's not a handgun with the way that she's holding it and other sort of mechanisms that come into play. I think the third issue here is their shooting accuracy. You know what I mean? If they're shooting at one woman at a specific target, how was there a stray bullet? How was there a stray bullet that ricocheted and went into the mobile home? I mean, and we say that, like, you know, the argument for you know, open carry and for having more guns, it's like, oh, if there's like a bad guy, you know, we'll be able to stop him with our gun. We'll be able to. No, even the trained officials in our country cannot even hit at one target.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, it's there. But that's what happens when you have a barrage of bullets. You shouldn't be surprised. That's why you shouldn't do a barrage of bullets. Right. And so look, that's why I keep emphasizing the training. Is it hard to distinguish a gun from other things? I guess, I get it. So, but that's not to me, that's not the issue. I think what the issue is, if you haven't seen a gun, don't shoot, is what I would tell them. Yeah. But that is not what they're being told. If you think there's any chance there's a gun, shoot. I mean, the guy in the hallway, the 26-year-old white guy who was killed in the hallway that was begging for his life. Yeah. He was in shorts and a t-shirt. A rifle had been reported. Turned out it wasn't really a rifle, but there was no rifle, there was no gun. And he went to pull up his shorts as he was crawling on the ground, and they shot him anyway. And in this case, there's no gun. Afterwards, they're like, there was some brown object somewhere nearby. No, you never saw a gun, and that's because you were trained. Don't bother looking for the gun. If you see the gun, it's too late. Just shoot and kill the other person first. I don't want my cops trained that way. Yeah. And Ida's right. Look, yes, the cops are the tip of the spear, so they're getting the most heat. It's the system that's the problem. And by the way, to give cops not credit, but to understand a little bit more, and I've said this a million times on the show, now everyone's got a gun. Yeah. So that's part of why cops are jittery. And to Hannah's point, the right wing tells us, oh, it'll make everyone safer. Do we look safer? No, all the cops are on razor's edge because they think, and rightfully so, that almost every American has a gun. So they're like, oh, I'm not taking any chances. I'm just gonna kill people. Yeah. And so now when a 6-year-old dies, we're broken up over it, and we should be. But the real problem is in the system.
Yeah, it shouldn't take a white man, a little boy, a woman to get killed for there to be a call for reform for the police. And that's the issue, because when people say, oh, these black, Mike was a criminal or Trayvon was a criminal, it shouldn't take, and Trayvon wasn't murdered by the cops, but it shouldn't take a white man, a father. This shouldn't even be the conversation. The conversation is that citizens are dying at the hands of law enforcement because there is a deficiency in the system and it needs to be addressed. And everybody should be concerned about it. It shouldn't matter to you only when your group is affected. That's
Bingo.
it.
Yep, absolutely.
Moving on. A 17-year-old neo-Nazi has been charged with murder after murdering his girlfriend's parents once they reported his Hitler-fueled social media posts. Now, this is a picture here of Scott Fricker and his wife, Buckley Kuhn Fricker, who are the victims of this crime that took place in Reston, Virginia. Now, on Sunday night, Kuhn Fricker, the girlfriend's mom, alerted the principal of the Fairfax County private school that her daughter and the boyfriend attend, attaching numerous images of an account that she believes belonged to the boyfriend that had retweeted missives praising Hitler, supporting Nazi book burnings, calling for white revolution, making derogatory comments about Jews, and featuring an illustration of a man hanging from a noose beneath a slur for gay people. Now, in private Twitter messages, the account Kuhn Fricker attributed to the boyfriend responded to a photo of a candy shop that featured a display of a dreidel by writing, "I'm a run in there with my swastika armband right now." Now, Kuhn Fricker wrote that her daughter told her over the summer that the boyfriend was also very good at history, and that her daughter asked, "Did you know that Jews are partly to blame for World War II?" So obviously this alerted the mom and the parents, and so they wanted them to split up, and they actually staged an intervention. Now, after staging this intervention, the family believed their daughter had come to the realization that a breakup was in her best interest. So the mother texted a friend on Thursday night saying that the daughter was going to break up with the boyfriend, and that she had actually texted the boyfriend's mother that the boyfriend, we're not saying his name because he is a minor, was sneaking into our house at night and is an outspoken neo-Nazi. These things render any legal redemption void. Now, around 5 a.m. on Friday morning, Kuhn Fricker and Fricker heard a noise and discovered the teenage boy in their daughter's bedroom. The teen shot and killed the parents before inflicting a wound on himself. Now, he is currently in critical condition. No other family members were harmed, but this is an unbelievable and unspeakable tragedy that is I have no words. I really do have no words for this.
Well, so I hear from time to time from the alt-right, oh, we're just having fun when we do neo-Nazi imagery online, and all the different memes that, oh, it's just fun, it's just funny. We go on all these sites and we just like to rile people up, and we think people are too sensitive, so we like to offend people for fun. And what I've said over and over again is you turn people into neo-Nazis and then you think it's fun and that you're all having a good laugh over it. But it's not funny, and almost, there's about 250 to 300 million guns in the country. So you think some percentage of those neo-Nazis that are trolls online aren't serious? They are. And now these two lovely people died.
Look, I mean, look at the people that were armed in Charlottesville. Yeah. I mean, that was ridiculous. And I think this story is most upsetting to me, I think, because these parents, all they were doing was the right thing. Yeah. They were trying to protect their daughter from somebody who was spewing this hatred and bigotry and violence. And they said, you know what, we think that you should break up with this boy. And this is what happened. I mean, what else could they have done?
So, and I would say, so people get upset with me sometimes when I say that there's some mental illness issues dealing, because I always get the argument, well, every time it's a white person, it's mental illness, but when it's a person of color, they were just being evil. And I'll say, this young man seemed troubled, because when his girlfriend broke up, His response to breaking up was murder. So these people are preying on your children as a mom. Those people are no different than gangs. Those neo-Nazi groups, those groups it's the same mentality that is looking for somebody who is empty and needs a family and has found a home. And that boy probably has some mental issues because he killed 2 people because they made him break up with his girlfriend. Like, normal people don't do that. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 things at play here, right? I think the neo-Nazi ideologies that came into his life, I think, are obviously a big component, right? And a lot of neo-Nazi ideology perpetuates and talks about violence, right? I think the other issue that comes into play, and you were, kind of reminded me of it when you were talking about it, is toxic masculinity and telling boys that to be strong and to be manly, you have to have a gun and you have to show people and man up and get some balls and whatever it is that the society tells young boys is how they should show their masculinity. And so he took a gun and wanted to show the people that hurt him who was boss or who was the man in the situation. And we see this time and time again, and this is a common reaction, and this is, just a perfect example of domestic violence that was also fueled by neo-Nazism to, combine to create this horrendous tragedy on this poor family.
Yeah. I blame the neo-Nazi alt-right culture online. They encourage it every day. And they think it's funny. Oh, let's, what's the big deal about offending Jews and blacks and Latinos? Ha ha. And it's not funny. It's incredibly dangerous. And you're stoking a certain percentage of the people that are participating in that to do horrific things like this.
Oh, I'm not throwing them a pass. But what I'm saying is that from a parental standpoint, these are the people who he's 17. They're preying on these young, impressionable minds with this toxic stuff, and these are the results of it. And I think that you have to watch your kids because the internet is real, and I don't think people really understand. The internet is the biggest babysitter right now, and I don't think people understand what's out there feeding these kids. I do blame, neo-Nazi groups, and I'm a victim of dealing with the oppression that comes with white supremacy in America daily as a woman of color. So I'm always combating it, and people call me angry for it all the time. But I think that, and also these 2 people lost their lives because they stood up against racism and this ideology. And I think that it's so sad. But to the people who say that there are no people out there who stand up to this stuff, no white people, look at these white people who lost their lives.
Yeah, and they're in a huge way American heroes, and I think that the people that encourage this stuff are culpable. Look, BuzzFeed did a giant expose on how Milo did his big thesis for the alt-right, and he asked a bunch of neo-Nazis for input into it. It was so bad that Robert Mercer, the big benefactor of Breitbart, even had to pretend to pull his funding. He didn't, he just handed it off to his daughters, right? But these are the guys that they asked for guidance from. And look at what the results are. I mean, so the courage of this family was wonderful and laudatory, but there's monsters among us. Oh yeah. And they're encouraging violence and hatred day in and day out. And this is one of the tragic results of it. Man, sorry, it's a sad day in news. It really is. Unfortunately, these days we have too many of them. All right, when we come back, we got another story about abortion rights. It's now they're under attack by the so-called moderate in the Republican Party, but a little lighter story. And I'm going to be a little bah humbug about, but a liberal sends poo to somebody in the Trump's cabinet. Is it the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do? We'll discuss.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be right back. That 300 million is a pretty good number, we were doing a press release on it, and I got all worked up. And I said, okay, well, that's the size of the US population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world.
world on the road to 6 billion. Although by the time we hit it, it'll probably be 7, maybe 8 billion.
Not a big deal. A couple of days ago on the TYT network, we passed 1 billion views.
What the hell?
What the hell?
No, that's a big freaking deal.
2 billion views.
What now?
Sorry.
What did we do? 2 billion?
2 billion.
They said it couldn't be done, but it was done.
We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking, one day.
We looked at you like, are you nuts? Young Turks crosses 6 billion views.
They said you couldn't do it, you can't change the media, don't try. Well, here we are, we're changing the media. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I know what you're thinking.
I love how you do something with your lips when you play the sound clips.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Look at his lips.
I was a woman.
No, you're closing your mouth. Usually I'll be like, and I'm like, is he like lip syncing it?
I don't know. I never noticed it until you said it.
It's a funny habit.
It's not human intelligence!
TYT member.
They're kicking me out the door. They're kicking me out the door.
Favorite thing you have in common with your daughter?
I was going to say sex, but I can't relate that.
He said I had small hands. They're not small, are they? I never heard that one before.
Back on the Young Turks, members of the day are Richard Parabek and Kelly Riddell. Thank you guys. You can join for the next couple of days at least by getting 3 months of membership for $25 or giving that as a gift to someone you know or care about. tytnetwork.com/gift. In order to do that, please take advantage of that while that's around. Crayfish Caddy writes in, if you can't tell if a person has a weapon or not, you're unfit to be a cop. That should be the first test they give you. Rayford Madness says the police are doing exactly what they're trained to do. It's a feature, not a bug. That's the problem. The solution isn't better training. It's an entirely new vision of what we want cops to do. So the entirely different vision of what we want cops to do is a really great point and something we've discussed on the show before. All right, more stories for you guys. What's next, Hannah?
Ohio Governor John Kasich officially signed into law a bill that would ban abortions for fetuses diagnosed with Down syndrome. Now, the law, which goes into effect in 90 days, prohibits a person from performing, inducing, or attempting to perform or induce an abortion on a pregnant woman who is seeking the abortion because an unborn child has or may have Down syndrome. Now, 2 other states, including Indiana and North Dakota, have passed similar laws. But Indiana's law was actually struck down in September by U.S. District Court Judge Tanya Walton Pratt, who said in her decision that the United States Supreme Court has stated in categorical terms that a state may not prohibit any woman from making the ultimate decision to terminate her pregnancy before viability. Now, NARAL Pro-Choice Ohio Executive Director Kelly Copeland said in a statement after this law was signed that this law shames women and will have a chilling effect on the conversations between doctors and patients because of the criminal penalties that doctor will face. She makes a really good point there, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that come into play when we're talking about this particular story, including the fact that, if a woman says, I want to have an abortion, period, then she can have it. But if she finds out that the fetus has Down syndrome, then the doctor is culpable, which creates a really treacherous relationship between the doctor and the patient.
But isn't that how oppression works, right? Isn't that how you get the women through the doctors? Because the war on women continues, you know what I mean?
So look, folks that have loved ones who have Down syndrome, they're very concerned about this, understandably so, and they think it's certainly not right to abort on that alone as a factor, and that's a perfectly great point and should be recognized as such. But that is up to the woman to decide. So I'm not going to get between her and her doctor. I'm not going to get in that room. I'm not going to make that choice. I think it is deeply morally objectionable to try to make that choice for anybody. And so we shouldn't even be in the room. Why are we peering into their private lives and having the government trying to make decisions for them? And this from the people who claim they're against big government. It's a lie, it's a lie, it's a lie. They love big government when it's controlling women.
That's right.
Yeah, no, I think, Jake, you bring up a really good point when talking about people who have Down syndrome, right? And who speak out against, women who do decide to have an abortion if the fetus, you can detect that the fetus has Down syndrome. Of course, there are amazing people who grace us on this earth who have Down syndrome. Absolutely, and they are gifts probably to the people whose families they belong to. They're gifts to all of us. That said, we could say that for so many different cases where a woman decides to get an abortion, right? I mean, there are beautiful people who are the product of rape or incest, who are gifts probably to their families. There are people who are products of a woman maybe who wanted to have an abortion where she couldn't afford to have a child, who are probably still gifts to this earth. It doesn't really matter. A woman gets to decide what happens to her body regardless of the reasoning that she has. And I do want to bring up some of the reasoning. So there was actually a study that was done to figure out why women got abortions, and it happened in 2004. So some of it's a little dated, but I think the gist of it is here. And the biggest reason that women get an abortion is having a baby would dramatically affect their life, and they're not ready for that, whether it be their education or their career. They can't afford a baby now. Maybe they're a single mother or they're in an abusive relationship and things like that. Now, down at 13% is there were problems with the fetus, developmental problems with the fetus. So that's a really, really low percentage comparatively to 74%, 73%, and 48% respectively to the issues that I brought up. That said, it should not matter, and by enacting this sort of bill and enacting this law, it becomes a slippery slope of when we get to say what is okay. When can a woman have an abortion? When can we allow a woman to have agency over her own body? And so that is something that I would really like to avoid. But John Kasich, even though he says that he's a moderate Republican, has not been, especially when it comes to choice. And there's so many different things that he has enacted in Ohio specifically to go against women, to be anti-choice, including the heartbeat bill. He's strips funding from rape crisis centers if they mention abortion as an option. He makes women get medically unnecessary ultrasounds and then has a 24-hour waiting period. And then they require parental consent for all patients under 18. And they've also removed funding for, tried to remove funding for Planned Parenthood and force women to bury or cremate aborted fetuses. He is not a moderate. He is anti-woman, and this is extreme.
When do they determine if the child is when the fetus is Down syndrome? Is that in the first trimester?
I don't know the exact.
So I'm sure that it varies. I'm not sure about the exact week that they do that, but Down syndrome is not the only thing that they could determine about a fetus. The different issues that most of the 13% I imagine is what I've heard a lot from women, which is, it didn't have a heartbeat, it didn't have this, it didn't have that. There was it was never going to get carried to term.
Right.
And in some of those states where it's a verifiable scientific fact that it's not going to be born. It's not good, and they're like, nope. You still need to carry to term and and it's not even going to make it to term, but you need to have a miscarriage or you need to have a stillbirth.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, get out of the room, get out of their lives.
And a lot of it has to do with economics. The same people who are so anti-abortion are the ones that are anti-welfare, that are the ones that are anti-poor people who cannot afford to have these children. I had a baby young. And I had to hide from my parents who were going to try to force me to have an abortion because of religion. And they said I was going to hell and they were going to force me to have an abortion. But up until I got pregnant, they were anti-abortion.
Of course.
They were anti-abortion, and I was going to hell for having premarital sex. And then I was going to hell for bringing a baby into this world. They didn't know what the hell they were doing. They didn't know what they were talking about, and they were letting religion drive them crazy, and they were trying to drive me crazy. I had my baby, but that was my choice. It was my choice to have my baby. I'm no better than my friends who chose not to. And I'm so tired of hearing about women constantly being policed. Our bodies are constantly being policed. How many hours do they spend talking about women and what to do women with all the other shit that's going on in our country that needs to be addressed, like this little boy that just got shot by the police because they had a shootout with a trailer. This is the stuff that pisses me off. It doesn't matter if the baby has Down syndrome, or if the fetus has Down syndrome, or if the person is sick, or if the person just does not want to have a baby. Like, I just don't understand why we are constantly worrying about this. You know why? Because there's a war on women, and you guys keep saying it here, and it doesn't end. Every day it's a different story about how to hold women down. I wish a man could have a baby. Abortion would be legal.
It would solve a lot of problems.
It wouldn't be an issue. I mean, that's the thing, is if a man could have a baby, we wouldn't be policing abortion this way. If a man had a period, there wouldn't be a luxury tax on tampons. We wouldn't be dealing with this.
That's right.
I mean, it's bullshit. It's such bullshit.
Okay, all right, what's next?
All right. Bernie Sanders said on Sunday that he wants to see a revolution in this country in the way that we treat women. Take a look.
Al Franken indicated that he was going to resign. And I think what Franken did touches on an issue of enormous consequence for this country. And what I worry about, Jake, is not just what happens with regard to famous people. We see that in the papers every day, whether it's in the media, the corporate world, or in politics. Right now, as we speak, in restaurants all over this country, in offices all over this country, there are folks who are not famous, who are harassing women, making demands on women that are obscene. And we need a revolution in the way we treat women at the workforce from the bottom on up.
So this is a really important point that Bernie Sanders made, and I really want to draw attention to this because I think it's crucial that we recognize this. Now, the Me Too movement has been so empowering and so effective in so many ways. That said, it is a movement for the privileged. Most of the people that are coming out are famous women. They are rich white women, frankly, and it's leaving out an entire demographic of women who cannot come forward and say Me Too. Now, the majority of women who are sexually harassed or sexually abused are actually within the service industry, right? And those are women who maybe who are in hotel rooms alone with guests who they cannot come out against, or if they're in a restaurant and it's somebody that they're waiting a table on or something like that, or if they're a housekeeper and their boss and there's no union to protect them, their boss is the person who is sexually harassing them or sexually abusing them. There's no HR department or anything like that. These women are being left out of this movement. We are forgetting the women in this movement as we try to combat this horrendous and ubiquitous problem. Now, I want to show you here a chart here that talks about the total sexual harassment charges filed by industry between 2005 and 2015. Now, keep in mind while looking at this that these numbers aren't totally representative because sexual harassment is one of the most underreported crimes that we have. And so these numbers might be much bigger, much greater, especially in the service industry where women may not feel that they can come out and report these things. So let's look at this. Now, the top reportings are accommodation, food services, the retail trade, healthcare and social assistance, administrative and support and waste management, and remediation. So all of these sorts of service industries. And then you look down at 1.61%, and that's arts, entertainment, and recreation. So it feels like every single day we see another actress coming forward or musician coming forward talking about sexual harassment or sexual abuse. That only accounts for 1.61% of these sexual harassment charges. And when you're looking at the majority of sexual harassment that is happening, it is within these service industries, and we're completely leaving behind these low-income women, oftentimes women of color, and we need to change that. We need to start from the bottom up, just like Bernie Sanders is talking about.
So didn't I tell you the other day that when I was here last week, that when I went to breakfast with you, I left relieved because you weren't a pervert? And I was like, oh, thank God. That it's in the sensibility of all women that when we go, we have to encounter a man in a position of power, especially someone who is far more empowered than we are. We have to worry about being in a situation that's going to be uncomfortable because it is so embedded in our culture. And I always think about the girls at Applebee's, and when I work at the comedy club, because I'm the headliner that weekend, I encounter someone being inappropriate with me. So I always think about the servers that are there, because if I say something, something can happen, but those girls can lose their jobs. Even the other day when you asked me about Russell Simmons, I have to be really careful because he's a producer of comedy shows, and if I say the wrong thing about Russell Simmons, I may not work in a comedy show again. We always have to think about these things. This is a cultural issue. I mean, where in the world can you go that women don't feel, that they're being that they're second best, or they're being, you know what I mean? It's everywhere. It's in everything. And I do agree with Bernie. We have to have a paradigm shift, and it begins with the education of our boys. The biggest feminist in my house is my son. My daughter knows. I talked to her about it, but I had to educate my son on how to treat women.
So, you told me that story off air about the breakfast.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a really interesting perspective. I never thought of it that way, because I go to breakfast meetings all the time. I don't think twice about it. But from your perspective, when you were going to talk to me about a show, you had to be concerned, is this that type of guy or that type of guy? And when you said that to me last week off air, I was like, wow. Like, I have never had to go to any meeting, breakfast or otherwise, where I thought, might I be in danger, right? And what might happen here that puts me in an incredibly awkward spot. So just try to think of the shoe being on the other foot and broaden your perspectives here. And for what Bernie said, Look, I know why the media covers other stuff more, and it's very logical, right? So everybody knows Harvey Weinstein, everybody knows Kevin Spacey, and a lot of people know the accusers, Ashley Judd, et cetera, right? And so it's hard to resist that story, and you shouldn't. And in fact, covering that 1.6% has led to, I think, an awakening that affects the rest of the culture and rest of society. So I think it's been a great movement overall. We just have to find a way, and I'm not sure what the answer is, to get the help for other women that need it when it's not as interesting to the rest of the media to cover them.
Yeah, I think you make a really great point, Cenk, because it is important that the Ashley Judds of the world, Rose McGowan, Lupita Nyong'o, it's so important that they came out because they really did sort of expedite this cultural shift in a way that people could sort of grasp onto because they're tangible. We know who they are, right? They have name recognition, and it's important that they do come forward. And it's important that things shift from top down as well. Like it's important that we, have sexual harassment training in Congress and Senate, and we make more laws to try to prevent this sort of thing from happening. But I think what Aida is getting at, and that is really, really important here, is that it's not so much. Obviously, the punishment of the men who do these things is very crucial, right? And who talk like this and who commit these sorts of acts are crucial to this shift that we see. But it's also really about education. Like for women, like you were talking about, Cenk, for women, it's not like if we are going to get sexually harassed or if we are going to get sexually assaulted, it is when.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the reality of what it means to be a woman. And so you can go to one meeting and it could be okay, and then the next meeting it's not. And so for these women who have these established careers and who have the platform to come forward, I applaud them. But if you are younger, if you do not have an established career, if you are in a low income job, if you are a person of color, it's not so easy. And so we need to provide a net for them to come forward about these things. We need to provide them protection, and we really need to provide an education for our boys that it is not okay to exert your power in these ways, and it is not okay to hold these beliefs that you can speak about, act around women in these ways.
Yep.
Say it again, girl.
Preach it. Okay, let's do one more story here.
All right. A man personally delivered horse shit in a gift-wrapped package to Steven Mnuchin's house this year as a Christmas gift to repay the Treasury Secretary for the new tax law. Now, he enclosed a nice little letter to him saying, "Hey, Stevie, we're returning the gift of the Christmas tax bill. It's bullshit." And this came from Robbie Strong, and then he wrote, "Warmest wishes, the American people." Now, this is a picture here of Robbie Strong, who admittedly sent the package to Steven Mnuchin, and he hand-delivered the manure to 2 Los Angeles homes that he believed belonged to him, one in Beverly Hills and one a mansion in Bel Air, that consequently got a visit from Secret Service agents and a bomb squad before they figured out what was actually in the package. Now, on Facebook, Strong wrote, "No disguises, no fake names, totally owning this one. You're only powerless if you do nothing." He continued his interviews with different news outlets. To one, he said he was like Jesus. So I'll read this quote. He said, "What I did, I'd like to compare to what Jesus did when he went into the temple and overturned the tables of the money changers who were exploiting the people financially in the name of religion. I feel like that's what the GOP has done to the American people." Now, he said that he's not worried about being arrested. He doesn't think it's illegal to deliver manure to somebody's house. And according to one official, if the president doesn't present any danger, he might not actually get arrested for this. So he hasn't been arrested this far, and it looks like he might not face any charges for this act. He's just getting death threats online, but that's how the internet works.
Yeah, so look, he's a funny guy, and I think he did this in the right spirit, but I'm gonna be a little bah humbug about it. He shouldn't have done it, because going to people's house is a different layer, and then everybody's showing up at everybody's house with shit, and at some point it's gonna hit the fan, and in the case of manure, sometimes they use manure for explosives, so that's why the cops had to be super careful, and they had to dump it all over the place, which actually led to the funniest quote. The widower of Zsa Zsa Gabor said, "We have $50 million homes and we can't move. They have to find another way." I wouldn't have phrased it that way to the press. Okay, so I think you're going to be all right in your $50 million home for a little longer, but don't go to people's house. Look, I like that there was no subterfuge. He was like, this is me. Right. I'm not a troll. I'm not this. I'm not that. And I don't have any bad intent. And I want to point out the tax bill is bullshit. But still, I would have counseled against it.
Yeah. So I don't agree with him going to someone's house, but I'm kind of glad that he did it with the shit. You know, that's a guy who wanted to use the government plane for a personal trip, right?
Yep.
That's the one who's with the actress, and they wanted the. So this is what happens when the people get fed up. These are the people that you are shitting on, and now the people you're shitting on are now taking the shit back to your house. Now, I don't think it's cool to show up at people's houses, especially people have families who are not responsible for what you're doing. But I do definitely think it sends a message that you're not. That everybody is accessible at this point. Your address is online, so you have to be accountable for how you treat people, because everybody is not 100%, and some people will show up at your house with a box full of shit.
I think you make one really good point that I want to draw attention to. He said that this was his form of protest, and that now we've become so jaded to protest that we see people on the streets that we sort of glaze over, and this was his way of bringing attention to something that he thought was really important, this tax bill that is screwing over Americans. So with that, I'm with him. Again, I'm with you guys. Don't go to somebody's house. Don't deliver shit to anybody.
You can get shot.
When they go low, we go high.
I don't know that I would have phrased it that way. Okay, look, last thing on this is that, look, he shows up with shit. I'm worried about people showing up with other stuff too.
Yeah,
right?
no, absolutely.
And so, and you know, Washington thinks that we're the radical left. No, you're going to find out soon we're the moderates. And there's a lot of people with pitchforks behind us, and some of them with shitforks. So like Ida's right. Like, don't mess with people. It's like they're pushing people too far. But do not, under any circumstances, go to anybody's house. It's a recipe for disaster. Okay, guys, we got to go. Ida, you got anything coming up real quick?
I'm at the Hollywood Improv tonight. If you want to drop by a box of shit.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. But check out Hollywood Improv. And I got Rebel Headquarters coming up next. Paul G. Swearengin taking on Joe Manchin. So come right back in 5 minutes. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, welcome to Rebel Headquarters. We've got two great guests for you guys. Adrienne Bell is going to join us in a little bit. She's fighting down in Texas against one of the worst Republicans in the country. So I want you guys to meet as many of the candidates as you can. We're going to talk to a lot of different progressive candidates, including next week, Ben Jealous is going to be on. He's running for governor of Maryland, and he's a wonderful progressive as well, former head of the NAACP, one of the big Bernie Sanders supporters there is. Okay, now in studio, Paula Jean Swearengin running against Joe Manchin, one of the most conservative Democrats there is in the Senate. Paula Jean, great to have you on the Young Turks and Rebel Headquarters.
How you doing?
Great, great. So I had Joe Manchin on the show, and I asked him who his top corporate donors were. Right. Number one, he says he doesn't know. Do you believe him?
No, I don't believe him, but I know the coal industry and Maryland Pharmaceutical.
Yeah, so he says that he's just taking money from those folks because he needs to run his campaigns and he's going to look out for the coal workers. Do you believe him on that?
There's a clear difference between being a friend of the coal industry and being a friend of a coal miner. And he doesn't need $4-5 billion to run a campaign. That's absolutely ridiculous. My campaign, I marched in May last year, got over $150,000 in small donations, $14.25, and I'm still going. So you can do it. Yeah. He don't need that kind of money. He's financially invested in our demise.
Okay, so we can get that number up, $14, and we can get that. I hear that you can get to up to $27 as an average. So right away, I want to give you guys links to Paula Jean's website and everything else. And these links are always in the description box below. If you're watching this, paulajean2018.com, and you see justdemocrats.com/Paula2018 to donate. Volunteers are the most important thing. So if you're in West Virginia, get out there and fight. You know, Manchin usually says of his opponents they don't understand coal miners, but you come from a family of coal miners. And so what did you learn from that experience?
Most of my family worked in the coal industry, and it's been boom and bust. And I've buried most of my family to the coal industry. The market for coal right now is down. It's not recovering. It's not projected to recover. And through that boom and bust, people are seeing again in this generation that people are going to go hungry, and they have in the coal fields. But what I've seen throughout West Virginia is, like in Weirton, in the eastern panhandle and the other panhandle in West Virginia, is people are dealing with fracking, and they're dealing with the pipelines coming through. Most of those jobs are outsourced. My vision for West Virginia is to create an investment bank. You've seen trillions of dollars go out of West Virginia for coal. I want to put that money back into West Virginia. We can see an economic turnaround if we legalize cannabis within 6 to 8 months. We can have agriculture. We can grow hemp on mountaintop removal sites. We can have solar and wind. I think that we can advance in West Virginia with renewables, and we can also manufacture those in West Virginia. There's a lot we can do. We don't have to kill each other for jobs. Joe Manchin's vision, he keeps on promising that he's going to serve his corporate donors. The people in West Virginia are tired, and through my travels and my campaign, I found out we're not only in the coal fields, but all over West Virginia. And we're going to invest in ourselves. We're tired of Joe Manchin. We're tired of Shelley Moore Capito. We're tired of Jim Justice. We're tired of all the corporate polluters in West Virginia. We have set the platform across the nation for cultural genocide. We're one of the poorest and sickest states in the nation, and we've had enough, and we're fighting back.
Don't go for Jim Justice, go for Justice Democrats.
That's right, that's right. Clear difference.
And you're one of the 3 Just Democrat Senate candidates, so right. Very, very important position. I never heard that idea before. That's really interesting, to plant marijuana on top of the mountaintops. That would be a hell of a sight.
Well, you know, they're not fit for a rattlesnake, but that hemp cleanses the soil. So I don't think that we can have essential oils with hemp, but we can create plastic, and we can do something with those sites. There's over 200 mountains have been blown up in West Virginia, so we can at least do something with them, because they're not the use for the land is there's nothing there for us. And so with hemp, it's been proven that we can do that with mountaintop removal sites.
You know, hemp, marijuana, et cetera. Look, some people think it's a small little issue. Some people think, oh, it's for the young. They just want to smoke pot and stuff. No, number one, in West Virginia, there's the pill mills, right? And they're pushing those legalized drugs that are the opioids, et cetera, that are killing people in West Virginia. Marijuana's never killed anybody. And on top of that, there's the idea of social justice, which is we got maybe 1 million people in the country we can free if we stop imprisoning them for nonviolent offenses like marijuana, let alone all the things that you mentioned on top. I feel like on that alone, you could set West Virginia free. But it feels like the older politicians think, oh, no, that's just for kids, and we're not going to do any of that.
We're dealing with one of the largest addiction epidemics in the nation. There's a small town called Kermit, West Virginia. It was proven, I think, 66. I'm nervous. I'm on the show. 60 Minutes done a segment, and there's 983 people in that community, and they shipped in 5 million pills to one pharmacy in that community. It's been a trickle-down effect with the poverty. It's been a trickle-down effect with the lack of educational opportunities. It's all come into play in West Virginia, and we need long-term solutions to fight the addiction epidemic, and we don't have that either. We hear the war on drugs, but we hear our incumbents saying they're going to come up with solutions, but they're treating one addiction with the other, with like Suboxone, and we're not seeing any long-term treatment programs. So I'm hoping through my path, through my candidacy too, I've traveled all over West Virginia, and I've talked to leaders that are looking for long-term solutions. We need more beds, we need more money going into long-term programs, as well as getting rid of the pill mills. And that means getting Big Pharma out of bed with Joe Manchin, Shelley Moore Capito, Evan Jenkins, and Jim Justice as well.
Yeah, those opioids are the actual gateway drugs. And West Virginia probably feels it more than any state in the country. So, the politicians say they're going to fight for you, but they take private money, they take giant corporate money, and 9 out of 10 times they wind up fighting for those guys. So how can West Virginians trust you to fight for them?
Because I'm one of them. I think it's time to build a country like we are with the candidates, with Justice Democrats and brand new Congress, putting ordinary people in the position to make decisions for ordinary people. The working class needs working class representation, and I think that's what is missing, because big corporations have a lot of influence in elections. And when I put my foot on my desk in Congress, I'll serve nobody but the people of West Virginia and the people of this nation.
So I asked Manchin about his corporate PACs, so I'm going to do likewise here. I want to be fair. Who are your top corporate PACs?
I don't have no corporate PACs. I have nothing but small donations, $14.25.
Yeah. Look, to me, I think that's gigantic, because can you trust the person running? Well, who's financing them, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a big part of it. If you financed them at $14.25, there's a good chance they're going to work for you. That's why public financing rather than private financing makes sense. But we're not there yet. So that's one of the theses of Just Democrats is, no, we're not going to take the corporate PAC money, so you can trust us to fight for you, or just us. So how about other priorities? So you're against the corruption. You mentioned the issues that affect West Virginia. What are the other big policy issues that you're going to fight for?
I think West Virginia's nation deserves health care, and I think that we deserve educational opportunities. West Virginia, again, is one of the poorest and sickest in the nation. And in order to create an infrastructure in West Virginia, be welcoming to business, we have to have good schools, we have to have good roads, and we have to have a good place for these people to come. So Amazon and people like Facebook want to come to West Virginia too. So we have to build up our communities as well, and get rid. Who wants to come to West Virginia if people can't pass a drug test? So it all goes into play. So we have to build a West Virginia where people want to come there, they want to live there. We won't have to deal with depopulation anymore. One thing I want to point out about my opponent is people keep on saying to me, and my biggest resistance has been establishment Democrats. Oh, well, you're going to hand it over to the Republicans. Isn't that what a primary is? Joe Manchin's a Democrat. I'm a Democrat. I want to bring democracy back to West Virginia, and I want to bring it back to the Democratic Party, like the miners of Blair Mountain, like Joe Hill, like Mother Jones. We deserve democracy. He's been our Secretary of State. He's been our governor. He's been our senator, and we don't have a plan B. We've not had a promise of a plan B, and we're one of the sickest and poorest states in the nation. And people say I'm inexperienced. Well, he's experienced in taking money from his corporate funders. I'm experienced because I've been an activist for my state for years. I've given up my life for my children. We have begged for clean water, we have begged for clean air, and we have begged for prosperity. And nobody knows about West Virginia than the people living up in the hollers that live in unimaginable conditions. And we know what we need the most. And Joe Manchin has no clue anymore.
Wouldn't it be amazing if we had non-millionaires, like regular Americans who just care about the community in the Senate? I know it seems like an unimaginable dream, but all you have to do is vote. I mean, volunteering and donating is super important so she can have a staff and do all the things she needs to do to win. But make sure you go out there and vote too. They tell you not to vote. But Joe Manchin, he was involved in several Democratic primaries in his career. I asked him about that when he was on the show too. And then he turned around when he lost one of the primaries and told everybody to vote for the Republican.
He did in the 90s. He lost the primary to Charlotte Pritt. And a lot of people ask me if I want to get behind Joe Manchin. Well, we have one of Don Blankenship in the race in West Virginia. If you don't know about him, 29 minors died and he went to jail. He's still on probation. He's actually here in Los Angeles. I don't know how he's on the Senate ticket on the Republican side for West Virginia. It baffles me. But I'll be honest. People have asked me if I would get behind Joe Manchin. If Don Blankenship would win the primary, I would pound the streets for Joe Manchin. But people have to also understand too that Joe Manchin is also responsible for those 29 miners dying because he didn't stand up against Massey and he was taking donations from Massey Energy. I'm the only person in the race that doesn't have the blood of the 29 miners on my hands, except for a man named Bo Copley on the Republican ticket in Logan County, and he's a coal miner. And that says a lot about our senatorial candidates right now, that I do not have the blood of 29 miners on my hands or in my pocketbook.
There's no, like, people think, oh no, Blankenship can win. No, he can't. You would beat him with a stick. A guy who did that to the coal miners in West Virginia versus an uncorrupted candidate who's going to look out for their interests, that's a no-brainer. And I'd be really interested to see if you win the primary, if Manchin backs you, as you've said you'll back him. So, but we might never find out.
I won't back Manchin unless Don Blankenship's on the primary ticket. Now, somebody in the general on the Mountain Party or the independent ticket goes against Joe Manchin. If I lose the primary, I don't plan on losing. But if I lose the primary and somebody, you know, if somebody is viable on the ticket, it might be me. I don't know yet. Then I'll get behind them because I have a hard time getting behind Joe Manchin because, like I said, he has just as much blood on his hands as Don Blankenship because he did not stand up for those coal miners. He should have been a voice for the coal miners before re-election.
All right, Paula Jean Swearingen, as you can tell, strong, progressive, uncorrupted. So check out the links below. See if you'd like to help by volunteering, donating, somehow get involved, fight for justice. So thank you, Paula Jean. Great to have you here. All right. We'll be right back, guys. We've got Adrian Bell coming up, another fighter, this time against a terrible Republican in Texas. We'll tell you all about it when we come back. All right, back on Rebel headquarters. I've got one tweet I want to read for you guys before we go to the next interview. John Bolden writes, holy shit, why is this lady not running for office? She summed up exactly my opinion on women's issues. If you're referring to Hannah, that's because she works here. If you're referring to Ida, you never know what Ida's going to do. And she's awesome. If you're referring to Paula Jean Swearingen, don't worry, she is running for office as the next senator from West Virginia. All right, let's move on to another candidate for you guys. She's also uncorrupted. She's also a Just Democrat. Adrienne Bell, welcome to Rebel headquarters. Great to have you here.
It is such a wonderful opportunity to speak with you, Cenk. I am so excited. And I just want to say that my sister introduced me to TYT. Her name is Sharon. She's a great fan of yours. And I just want to say on behalf of all the progressives in this great movement, thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you for all that you've done to move the movement forward.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you saying that. And your sister's name was Sharon, right?
Her name is Sharon Randall, and she is probably watching right now.
Hey, Sharon, how you doing? Thanks for spreading the word. All right, you're running against Randy Weber. I want to get to your story in a second, but first, if people don't know, who's Randy Weber and what's he up to?
Well, the esteemed gentleman from Texas, Randy Weber, who has the seat right now, he is a Freedom Caucus member. He also votes and aligns his values with the Trump administration. And therefore, he votes along with the GOP Congress the way they vote now. So he is not for women's rights. He's not for the progress of those who have been marginalized in the communities. He's not for marriage equality. He's not for a lot of things that, frankly, I'm for.
Okay, so people will ask you, why are you running? What got you interested in this to make you stand up and say, you know what, I'm going to fight back, and it's going to be me that does it?
Right. I'm running because I have a voice. And I want to use my voice to be the voice of the people whose voices have been silenced during this administration. I'm running for veterans. I'm running for teachers. I'm running for senior citizens. I'm running for single women. I'm running for those who are part of the 99% who feel as though this government is totally ignoring them. So
I want to show the links to Adrienne's website here and donations, justdemocrats.com/Adrienne 2018. And then volunteering is the most important thing. But if you can't give your time, give your money, because they all need staff, they all need voter rolls, they all need ways to compete. So let's talk about your priorities then. In terms of policy, if you were the next congressman from the 14th district, what would you push forward?
I would push, I'm an educator. And I am working on my doctorate in higher education. So education holds a great deal of value to me. I still believe that if you work hard, you get a good education, you can make it in America. So one thing that I really will push for is early childhood education. I don't believe in high stakes testing. I believe that we need to be able to measure a student's progress, but to measure that based on their reading level. And so I would push for early childhood education. I also would push for criminal justice reform. We have too many Black and brown men that are locked up in our prisons. We have a lot of people that are in jail just because they cannot pay a bond. And so that's something that I would push for as well. But one of the main things also is Medicare for all, and to make sure that the right of healthcare insurance, healthcare for all of our Americans is ensured, and that all Americans are covered by healthcare.
So let's take those one at a time. You got a master's degree and it says here you're currently pursuing a PhD in education administration. Are you going to finish the PhD from Congress?
Well, I actually finished all of my coursework, and I have not been able to study for my comprehensive exams because I decided to run for office. And so I'm really going to try to get my comps passed next year so that I can work on my dissertation. And my dissertation is on teachers and the revolving door we have of teachers leaving the education system, the cost that it is to America with so many teachers leaving, and what it's doing to our education system.
So, man, I love talking to you guys. I mean, these are real folks who want to help people and have fought for their community, and with all these wonderful varied backgrounds. Wouldn't it be amazing if we had American citizens that were not beholden to corporations, that were free to represent you guys? And so no corporate PAC money, right?
Right. I am, as Shirley Chisholm say, I will go to Congress unbossed and unbought.
I love that. Unbossed and unbought. It's a great slogan she came up with all those years ago. Still applies today. Of course, all those links, by the way, if you want to help with small dollar donations, etc., are in the description box below whenever you're watching these videos or comments on comment section on Facebook. All right, let's say criminal justice reform. So what shape would that take?
Well, part of it is training for officers. Just the other day, when you have, well, it happens so much, and which, with the Black Lives Matters movement, is just talking about how officers needing to be more sensitive about the cultures, needing to recognize the cultures that they are working in and how people vary. And so having sensitivity training for officers, having training that is unilateral. And so in Texas, we have the Sandra Bland law, and we had the real tragic incident of Sandra Bland being killed by an officer due to a traffic stop that could have been avoided. So we need to have norms of traffic stops. When do you actually stop someone? And so something that is carried on across the state, across the nation, so that it is uniform. And having body cams, that was a big discussion, and it was talked about, well, we can't afford body cams. Well, we cannot afford to continue killing innocent citizens in this country. So we've got to work on anti-gun violence laws that goes with not just criminal justice, but also that goes with guns. And not talking about taking away anyone's gun. I do live in Texas. I do know the importance of guns in Texas, but there is no reason why we have assault rifles or why anyone has to own an assault rifle unless they really try to do mass murders. And so criminal justice reform is really taking things down to the local level where we stop locking people up, and that we have bail bond laws that are fair and that you can sign out under your own signature. And we're not keeping people in jail just because they can't post a $500 bail bond.
Yeah, and in my opinion, this is obviously just mine, but the drug charges are nonviolent drug charges are a health issue. They're not a prison issue. And we need to liberate those folks. When if you're addicted to painkillers, we're not putting you in jail, nor should we. And and we shouldn't do that for other drugs either. Okay, real quick, because we've got about a minute left. How are you going to beat a Republican in what is currently a Republican district?
Well, it won't be easy, but it's not impossible. And our big charge is to get out the vote. We've got the people, we've got the numbers. It is just to turn out the vote for people who are ready for a change. And as President Obama told us, one voice can change a room. And if one voice can change a room, that one voice can change a city, that one voice can change a state, it can change a country, and we can change the world. So in Texas, we are working for that blue wave to be a tsunami, to happen all across this nation where we actually change our nation and move it forward.
God, these are great candidates, and so Just Democrat, and I'm hoping the next Congresswoman from Texas 14th District. I wanted to call you Dr. Bell for a second, but that's jumping the gun. All right.
Jake, next time when you invite me back, I do want to come to the studio and talk with you.
That would be great.
To do that.
I would love to do that. Thank you so much, and good luck in the race.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we are out of time. We got the post game coming up next for the members, tytnetwork.com/join to become a member. We'll see you there.